doing?
My name is Sam, and I'm on a journey to be successful, not just financially, but physically, socially, and spiritually. The purpose of this podcast is to learn how to do that. So I interview people I think we can all learn from. This is The Growth Apprentice. Welcome to the podcast, Sister Zabriskie. How's it going?
Good, thank you. How are you, Sam?
I'm doing great. Yeah. So my first question for you is how did you get into capitalism or not capitalism? I think being born into America would get you into capitalism. How did you get into
That's
economics?
So in college, I remember taking an intro to economics class, and I was fascinated by it. I thought it was really fun. I don't really know why I didn't pursue it more at the time. That's been a while, we'll just say.
Hmm.
But then there's two factors that kind of got me back into it. I have an older brother who I am pretty close with, who is a business owner, a small business owner, and it's been interesting to talk to him over the years about different facets of his business, different employee attitudes or regulations, or how different laws have impacted him.
Yeah.
And then this last presidential election, as I heard candidates promising different things or proposing different policies, it kind of brought that all back. And I thought, hey, we ought to pay attention to this and start thinking things through. So that's
Yeah.
revived it for me.
That's cool. That's cool. So you've been teaching a class to us kids in the Vanguard group about economics. Why do you think it's important that people learn economics when they're younger?
That's a great question. There's a lot of reasons. From a political standpoint, it's easy to make promises or propose ideas,
Mm.
but if we as the citizens don't think through where those ideas will lead, then it's easy to just get caught up in a nice idea. So, learning to think through reality, learning to learn from history, see what's been tried in the past,
Yeah.
um, is pretty important. So
Yeah.
learning to recognize just because somebody says something doesn't mean it's possible or a good
Hmm.
idea or will have the results that they think it will. So just learning to
Yeah.
think and not just bite on the idea, I think is powerful.
Yeah, I think that is very powerful. One lesson that stood out to me is we talked about stage one and past that thinking. It's like maybe you have something now, but it's gonna have hidden costs that you don't think about. Could you explain that to us, like the different stages when an idea is proposed and how we
Yeah,
have
I'd
to think all the way?
be happy
Yeah.
to. So this idea comes from Thomas Sowell, who is famous in the economics world and um, in the conservative world. You probably, if you hear his name, people generally speak of him with great respect. Um, I think he's nearing 100, 94, 95. He's not a
Oh,
young,
he's still alive. I didn't know that.
he's still alive. He's
That's
still alive.
cool.
If you go on YouTube and search Thomas Sowell interviews,
Huh.
you'll find some great content. But that was kind of his rallying cry, is we have to think beyond stage one. Oftentimes, when a policy or an idea is first introduced, it sounds good, so we bite on it and you start down the path, and the short-term effects look good. But then you look years down the road and things start to fall apart. From a political standpoint, this gets tricky because the politician who proposed the idea and got the initial bump off it didn't
Yeah.
suffer any of the consequences of the long-term impacts. And so, anyway, just learning to think through, okay, this might work initially, but then what happens next? What happens next? What happens next? So he called
Yeah.
it thinking beyond stage one.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of what that might look like?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, we could talk about Obamacare, or affordable health care is a great example of that. Like initially that sounds
Yeah.
really good to get everybody to pull in and each pay their part, and then everyone gets the initial care that they need, and initially that might work really well. But over the long term, as you see a doctor losing more control of his practice, or losing more, how do I even say it? losing the incentive
Yeah.
to become educated to be able to provide the service that he wants to, because either um, there's too much control on what services he can give, or there's too much
Yeah.
demand on his time, and so it no longer is desirable to go into that practice. Um, I don't know, that's kind of a shady shady
No,
start,
yeah.
but that's an idea, and an example, excuse me.
Yeah. I think that's a good example. Um, let's talk about incentives because you're talking about that in the doctor example. Why are incentives important? Why don't we just force people to do what they need to do?
So, incentives are an interesting animal, and it's not necessarily, I mean, you can start out thinking, "I'm going to incentivize a certain behavior," or you can start out with a policy and then realize that it incentivizes behavior. Um,
Yeah.
so basically an incentive means a reward for doing a thing, right? So this is an example that you'll probably remember from class last year, and it's a really basic example, but I think it shows the power of incentive. So I went to visit somebody. I went with a friend to visit somebody that I didn't know. I hadn't met her before. And we went into the house and she had a little dog, a little yappy dog. And I'm not a big
Oh
dog,
yeah.
right? So we go in and I wasn't mean to the dog, but I wasn't loving on him either. And this dog kept jumping up
Mm-mm.
on the couch to sit next to me, jumping up on my lap, and I just wouldn't touch it, right? I wasn't anyway, but the owner could tell I wasn't comfortable with it, and so she
Yeah.
called her dog off, and the dog went off and sat by her. Well, it didn't take long for the dog to be up on my lap again, and so she called it back, and the dog wouldn't come, so she pulled out this jar of dog treats, and she pulled out a dog treat, and the dog knew, "Oh, hey, if I go over there, I get a treat," so it jumped down off my lap, went over, got the treat, enjoyed the treat. Within a few seconds, it was back up on my lap, so she called the dog again, gave it another treat. Well, she thought she was incentivizing the dog to stay with her, but really what she was doing was incentivizing the dog to jump up on my lap because it knew if it
Yeah.
didn't, it got a treat to get off. And I think a lot of times policies end up being that, right? Um, Trump's policy, no tax on tips, is an interesting one, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Um, if if I'm an employer of a business that doesn't ordinarily use tips, but now I see, oh, if I offer people the opportunity to give my employees a tip, then they get more money. I don't have to pay taxes. This is a win-win. So now all of a sudden we go to businesses that weren't normally asking for tips, and now we've all seen it.
Yeah.
This did start before the tax on tips policy, but you go into a store and when you sign the receipt, there's that option, right? Add a tip. Well, that's an interesting thing because we're now tipping before we receive the service, whereas a tip
Yeah.
used to be that you're tipping to get good service. And I've often wondered if I'm a cook in the back and I see the receipt come through and they didn't tip me, am I gonna just kinda do a sloppy job on that pizza? I don't know, right? Like you order a pizza
Yeah.
and can they tell? Did I tip or not? Should I be asked for a tip before? Anyway, that's kind of an aside, but I think you get the
Yeah.
idea.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like, uh, let's say you go in for a haircut somewhere, and it's common to tip
Mhm.
there. They want to make sure that you look great and that you like how you look, and so they're incentivized
They're
to do a
incentivized,
great
right?
job because then you're more likely to tip them well.
Right.
Yeah,
Right, but
that's interesting.
what if you're supposed to give them the tip before they do the service? Like, are they
Right, and then they don't even have to do a good job.
Right, so we've now taken away the whole point of a tip.
Yeah, and then it's
And
like it's tough for the company because they want the customers to come back, but if if there's not an incentive to do a great job, I think the
right,
tip should come after the service.
and in all honesty, I've when I'm thinking about where to eat, I will actually think, "Is this a place that I'm gonna have to tip? Is this a place I'm gonna be asked to tip?" And sometimes I
Yeah.
won't go to a place where there are tips involved, especially if it's a tip when you pay before you get the thing, right? Anyway,
Yeah. What are some places, where you have to tip before? I've never had that experience. Or maybe it
well,
wasn't an experience. We don't wanna really target any specific
right.
businesses, but
There are several, fast food type restaurants where you go up to the counter, you order, and then instead of giving you a receipt, they have an iPad that you sign for the
yeah.
receipt. And probably if you pay cash, that might eliminate that, I don't know. Anyway, and it's not that I'm against tipping, but just that idea
Yeah.
of you're gonna
Like I
ask
want tip because it
for
was
tip.
great, not because
Right. Or you
yeah.
go online to order pizza,
Yeah.
but you're gonna pick it up in the store, so you're paying ahead of time. If they're delivering it to your door, that's different, but if you're going for a pickup and you have to go through the payment process, that tip field will show up before it's
Yeah.
before you've even seen, "Do I get good service? Is this worth tipping?" Anyway.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting how that can incentivize different results because it might even disincentivize people to even go there
Right.
versus companies with a different tipping structure. It's like, okay, I'll go here and then if they did a great job, then I'll leave them a tip.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so why do you think capitalism is important? Why is that the model that seemed to work the best? Because there's a lot of other proposed models, but and capitalism isn't perfect, but why does that stand the test of time against others?
For me, one of the most powerful aspects of capitalism is the way to succeed as a business owner is to make my customer happy.
Yeah.
So I'm incentivized to provide a good or a service that other people want so that they will buy it and buy more of it. Whereas if we're in a command economy where the government decides how much of whatever is produced, um, and the prices are determined by the government, then I don't really have any motive to do something better than somebody else. Like
Yeah.
if I don't have an opportunity to benefit from additional work, I'm certainly not gonna put in extra work. Now, maybe in the
Yeah.
ideal world I would, but think about that. If you're not gonna get more muscle strength from doing an additional
Yeah.
10 bench presses, are you gonna do those bench presses? Not likely, right? There's gotta be a
Yeah.
reward again.
Right, like, if I get the same result going in once a week versus 6 times a week, I might as well save the time and just get going once to the gym, or if you're a business owner and you get the same paycheck no matter how hard you work, you're incentivized to not work hard at all.
Exactly, exactly. So if someone's willing to take the risk, they ought to
Yeah.
be able to reap the benefit, and if they can't reap the benefit, they're not gonna take the risk. So capitalism is an interesting thing in that way because everybody benefits when someone succeeds, and, it's common to look at millionaires and kind of villainize them.
Yeah.
But, people point to Jeff Bezos and why should he have that much money? Well, how many of us aren't loving the ability to order on Amazon, get on Amazon, have something delivered to your house 2 days later, or the
Yeah.
next day, or that day, depending on your level of
It's
subscription,
crazy.
right? Things that we could have never imagined. I remember the
Yeah.
first time I was talking to a young mom, we were talking about Christmas shopping and how hard that was, and she was probably 10 years younger than me, and she said, "Oh, I just do it all online." I thought, are you kidding? Like, how awesome is that? Hadn't occurred to me to do that. But we
Yeah.
have that because somebody could benefit from taking that risk, from setting that up. And that's
Yeah.
capitalism at its finest.
And even if it was purely, like, for selfish reasons, like, even
Oh,
if
yeah.
Jeff Bezos only wants a crap ton of money, it benefits all of us too because of the way the free market works.
Right. And that's the bottom line is he didn't steal that money from us. We gave it to him
No.
willingly because he had
Yeah.
something he wanted. And that's capitalism. Is
Yeah.
the opportunity to succeed, but also the opportunity to fail, and that you own that, right? If he failed, for the government to bail him out would have been wrong. He put up the risk, he stood to gain, he stood to lose, and thankfully for all of us, he gained, right? We're all better off. Um,
Yeah.
that's the power of capitalism in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Is there, any examples where you can think of where a company was trying to, work in a free market, but the government just kind of gets in the way, and at that point, they're just incentivized to leave it?
Oh, wow. Um, Man, I wish I could remember better the details of some of the fun my brother has had with
Oh, yeah.
his company, and it's probably not mine to tell, but, um, one example that and I'm very removed from this, there's a video on PragerU
Mhm.
about, um, a man who owned a cookie shop, and as a food provider, he's under the auspices of of OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health, whatever the A is, and the
Association,
USDA.
maybe?
You probably and the USDA and one other organization, the Food and Drug, maybe Food and Drug. Anyway, so he has his cookie shop set up, and he's got um, has random inspections. They show up to make sure that he's following all the protocol. So the inspector from one of the organization comes in and says, "Hey, you've got to replace that door because the door between your food service and your sales counter swings out, and it's supposed to swing in." And he says, "Oh, okay, I'll do that." He has 30 days to fix it or he faces a fine. So he
Yeah.
fixes it. Well, you know, 15, 20 days later, a random inspection from another organization comes in and he says, "Hey, you've got to fix this. Your door swings in instead of out.
Huh.
It's supposed to swing in." And he says, "Well, so and so came and they said it has to swing out." And they said, "Well, that's their policy, but this is our policy." And so he
Wow.
said, ultimately, I ended up keeping 2 doors, so I knew which I could put up the one that was right when the people came. That should never be that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's gotta be obviously, there's gotta be some level of safety and some level of precaution maybe, um, but for a business owner to be caught between 2 competing bureaucracies
Yeah.
and not be able to how do you win that? And
And were
it's
these
a
both
fascinating video.
government branches? Like, were these both
Yes.
under the government? Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
I think one of them might have been state and one of them national or whatever, but they hold all the power because they can show up and say, "If you don't do this, I close you down." And the other one
Yeah.
can say, "If you don't do this, I close you down." And as it
That's so
was, his
interesting.
I mean, his margins are like 1 to 2%, and then he's gotta take all this time working on the door. In fact, he
Yeah.
said, as a business owner, he said he works 100 hours a week, which is not atypical for a small business.
No.
And he said 35 hours, around 30 to 40 hours a week are spent on compliance with regulations.
That's
That's a
wild.
full-time job making sure he's following
Yeah.
rules.
Yeah,
So
and then it's taking from the customers because if he could put that time into customers, or he could put it into,
right.
like, his personal life and stuff like that.
Yeah.
35 hours is crazy.
It's insane. It's insane. It's a definitely a video worth looking up. If you
Yeah.
go to PragerU and search cookies, I imagine it would come up. I'm not 100% sure, but
Yeah. Yeah, their videos are great. So what do you think then that the government's role should be in free market and capitalism?
so I tend toward a more libertarian view. Less government, the better. I think
Mhm.
there definitely is a place for policing, um, for protection of private property, um, minimal regulations, I suppose, where it's warranted. You know, a food service industry to have inspections to make sure that they're doing things that keep the food safe to eat, I think make perfect sense.
Yeah.
Um, it's easy to get carried away on those. So I definitely think there is a place for involvement,
Mhm.
maybe. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think to protect our rights, but not to regulate so much
right.
and to, control.
I mean, the bottom line is if a business isn't doing things in a way that are proper and healthy, they're not
Mhm.
going to stay in business, right?
Yeah.
Should people die in the process because there's a food company that's not handling food well? Obviously, we could take that to the extreme too. But when it
Yeah.
comes down to silly things that are another example he gives in that cookie video is that um the type on the packaging had to be a certain size, at least a certain size, and his was like a millimeter off, and so
That's
he was
wild.
required to throw away all the packaging and buy all new packaging, which was $10,000 for
Yeah.
him to do that, and anyway, it's so there are things that are just ridiculous, like, why does that matter what size the type is on the label of his cookies? I don't know.
Yeah. So what do you think, an ideal market would look like? Like, if the government was doing everything, like, what does the ideal look like for you in the terms of capitalism and
Oh, wow.
economics?
That's a great question. really very little intervention. I kind of want to go back to that question you asked, actually. Another example of the government getting overly involved would be minimum
Yeah.
wage. That
Oh, yeah.
if you set a wage that employees have to be paid, you're now setting a level at which the business has to produce in order to succeed, to survive. If
Yeah.
I'm a business owner and let's say I advertise I need workers for $5 an hour. Well, I don't know who in today's world is going to work for me, right? Nobody's going to come in. So I'm going to figure out on my own that that's too low. And I
Yeah.
might bump it up to, maybe I bump it up to 10. I don't know. Let's say nobody's coming in and I've got a business I've got to run. Well, I have to decide, can I run this business on my own? Can I afford to hire more? Do I need to find another line of work? So those kinds of things for the government to come in and say, "You have to pay this much as a minimum wage," is kinda
Yeah.
ridiculous because
Yeah.
people don't have to nobody has to work for me. In a free
Yeah, I
market,
think people
nobody
are
has to work
already
for me.
incentivized to have good wages because you're not gonna no one's gonna work for you if they don't get paid well.
Right. On the other hand, if you say you've gotta pay them at least $15 an hour, and I've got somebody that's coming to me who really is desiring to work, and they're willing to work for me for 10, but I
Yeah.
can't pay them 10, then they're not gonna find a job. So that person's the one that loses out. My business might
Yeah.
suffer too, but so that would be an example of where if government were to just leave that alone and allow me to pay what I'm gonna pay, nobody's obligated to work for me. I'm not obligated to hire anybody. So without that intervention, we could each find our happy middle ground, right?
Yeah.
And you could take that and extend it quite a ways as far as an ideal setup. If the government
Yeah.
doesn't regulate my pricing, then I'm free to raise the price. If I can't keep enough in stock to keep people happy, I can raise the price until I
Yeah.
get to a point where if nobody's buying it, I'm gonna lower the price again, right? Because it doesn't do me any good to have a bunch of stock that I can't sell.
Yeah.
So those kinds of I think government being involved to make sure that things are safe, that I'm not taking advantage of people, which
Yeah.
again would be pretty hard to do because they could walk out on me. So I don't think they need nearly the protection that government likes to think they do. I
Yeah.
think often government's just trying to look for a way to keep themselves busy. I don't know. That's probably an understatement.
Yeah. It reminds me of, like, stage 1 and stage 2 thinking. My family will talk about sometimes how if you raise minimum wage, then the prices are gonna have to go up to afford that, and now you might be making more money, but now you gotta spend more money, the cost of living, and it's like at stage 1, it looks good, but you might even have less money than before because of the cost of living.
And politically, it's very popular because if
Yeah.
I'm working for a low wage and who doesn't like buying into the idea that I'm not being paid enough, right? You preach that, "Oh, you're being taken advantage of. You're not being paid enough. People don't appreciate you." And that's a way to get a bunch of people to vote for you because there are more people working low wage jobs than there are people working higher wage jobs. So just by sheer numbers, if you get all of that pool of people to vote for you, you get into
Yeah.
office, right? But then if you can't deliver on it, or worse yet, if you do deliver on the promise to raise minimum wage, and then those people end up losing their jobs. Just recently, California passed a law. This is a few years ago, passed a law to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And within a very short time, Pizza Hut laid off 1,200 delivery drivers
Wow.
because they knew they wouldn't be able to afford it. So all of a sudden, you have all these low wage earners who now have no wage because they're out of work.
Yeah.
Um, and California, thankfully, the residents learned from that. And when a raise to $20 was on the ballot, they voted it down.
That's good.
But that's a great example of a politician promising something, looks good, people vote for it. It
Yeah.
happens, and then all of a sudden you're out of a job, and it had the exact opposite effect of what was promised. So
Yeah.
that goes back to your first question, why we need to learn to think these things through.
Yeah, right. Because I don't think people would, sign a ballot to if it said, "Let's get, 1,200 Pizza Hut delivery drivers out of work." But that's
Right,
what happened.
right. And they talk about, "Well, you can't live on minimum wage." Well, nobody was meant to live on minimum wage. Minimum
Yeah.
wage jobs are meant for teenagers who are just going out into the world, just starting to figure things out, who have most of their expenses covered, right? They're still
Yeah.
living at home, they're still eating at home, they're just getting their feet wet in the workforce. So the idea that people working minimum wage jobs should be able to afford a place to live is putting the cart before the horse for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can, like, you can raise your own paycheck kind of, like, if you build the skills that are valuable to that company,
Oh,
you
wait, if
can
you're
get yourself to be paid
incentivized?
more.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
If you're
Yeah.
incentivized to become a better employee, you'll earn more. Hmm,
Yeah.
exactly. That's
Yeah.
capitalism.
That's capitalism. I love capitalism. It's not perfect, but I would rather flawed capitalism than anything else.
I think it's the best we have. It isn't perfect, but it's and we're not perfect, right? So
No.
therefore, we don't live under a perfect system. But that idea of incentivizing self-improvement, incentivizing innovation, those things are all part of what capitalism does for us.
Yeah. Yeah, because you see so much innovation in places where it's a free market because there is incentives to do it, but other places it just doesn't make sense.
Right?
Yeah.
That's exact
So what are some other market types around the world that have failed, but people have thought that they would work?
So the opposite of a free market would be a command economy
Mhm.
where where the government or somebody in the government decides what is produced, how much is produced, who produces it, and how much it should cost, which is a really interesting animal because
Yeah.
you know how much something should cost unless you actually are the one putting in the time, effort, and raw materials, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, those are kind of the two extremes: a free market slash capitalism versus a
Yeah.
command economy.
Yeah. I think looking at it from the standpoint of growing up in capitalism, you can look at other markets like, oh well, they're not incentivized to work. What are some of the main reasons you think people like what problems do people have with capitalism, do you think?
You know, a lot of times people point to those who become wealthy and think that's not fair, which is such an
Yeah.
interesting statement because, um, he who takes the risk should gain the reward.
Yeah.
If you own a business if you own the business and it does poorly, you don't get paid. But
No.
if you have an employee, the employee still gets paid. You can't go to the employee and say, "I'm sorry, no paycheck this week. I don't have any money
Yeah.
coming in." You have to draw out a savings or whatever, like, there's, um, the sense of security that comes from a salary or an hourly pay, and that comes with the trade-off. The trade-off is that you get paid every time, and the trade-off is that you only get paid what is due to you every time. Whereas if you're the
Yeah.
business owner, you take all the risk if things don't go well. And we've had that. My husband's a small business owner, and we've had that where times that we lived off of savings because nothing was coming in. Um,
Yeah.
and and after a lot of hard work and a lot of sacrifice, things are doing better and we do take a regular paycheck and there's cushion. Um, but it's he who takes the risk should get the reward.
Yeah. There's a saying I like. It says that if you don't like where the money like how the money's distributed, go and get it. Like it's it's a free market. You can go get the money if you want it. It's
And that's brilliant. That's brilliant. You don't go steal it, right? If you're stealing it,
yeah.
that's a problem.
Yeah.
But go figure out what do I have to offer that is valuable to somebody else. And that's why capitalism brings out the best in people too. It brings out innovation, somebody trying to figure out, okay, how can I make a better mousetrap? How can I make my product more desirable than my competition? Or what is there
Yeah.
that people want that they lack? How can I provide that? It's interesting because people often use the word self-interest to refer to capitalism, which is true. But in pursuing my own self-interest, which would be a bigger paycheck, I'm also
Yeah.
looking out for your self-interest because I'm trying to figure out what does Sam want that I could offer him that is more valuable to him than the money that he has. And so
Yeah.
it's the exact opposite of stealing. It's like I'm trying to create something that you want more than you want the money that you have. That's what I want, right? So we enter
Yeah.
into a trade for it.
Yeah, it's cool. There's a people talk about, like, if you have, like, a hot dog stand, the person buying the hot dog wants the food more than they want the dollar or $5 that they spend, and
Right.
it costs the owner less than that, and so it's a win for both of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What do you think some of the, common misunderstandings are about economics?
Another Tom Sowell quote is consequences matter more than intentions.
Yeah.
That for
That's cool.
somebody to come out and say, I want to benefit this sector of the population that's suffering, and therefore I'm gonna create a tax to take from this segment and give to that segment. That might be a very good intention that you want this group to be doing better, and yet it's interesting to ask, do I have a right to take from another person, from person A to give to person B? I don't have that right.
Yeah.
But somehow we think we can vote the government that right to take from person A to give to person B. If I can't,
Yeah.
the government shouldn't do it.
Right, because 'cause
Um,
they're here to protect our rights. They don't have any other powers that we don't.
right, exactly.
There's
So
the,
I think that's a big one.
yeah. It's like the thing with the horse, like, if there's a pioneer train and maybe someone has 5 horses and someone has none, even if everyone thinks that the other person should have it, it doesn't matter, you can't just take it from him, and they can give it to him,
Right,
but you can't force it.
right.
Yeah. So how do you learn about economics mostly? You quoted Thomas Sowell a couple times. Is he your main source?
I really like Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell, Milton Friedman, and Walter Williams are the 3 that I've probably spent the most time with. Um,
Mhm.
but there's some great classics. Henry Hazlitt he's the one that wrote, it's called Economics in One Lesson, and he
Yeah.
talked a lot about, it's kinda similar to Thomas Sowell's statement about thinking beyond stage 1. He said that the art of economics consists not only in looking at the immediate, but the longer term implications of any
Yeah.
policy. Not only looking at, how it will benefit a small group, but how it will impact the large group. And so I think that's yeah, those 3, YouTube is a treasure
Yeah.
trove of great information as well as all kinds of other stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but I love to watch there's, several interviews with Tom Sowell on a series called Uncommon Knowledge,
Oh, yeah.
that's fascinating. There's, a kind of a short documentary of his life called Common Sense in a Senseless World, one about
Hmm.
Walter Williams called oh, I just lost it. I can't think of it. Anyway,
Yeah.
um, and watching old Milton Friedman videos. Milton Friedman's passed away as well, but he he had a couple of appearances on the Donahue Show that were fascinating to
Oh, yeah.
just hear some of the discussions back and forth. Free to
Yeah.
Choose Network, that's free to if you Google Free to Choose Network, um, there's some great videos there. Any book by Thomas Sowell is worth your time, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So what do you think would happen if, everyone stopped learning about economics and we just let the government do whatever they want?
Well, the government would continue to get bigger and bigger,
Mhm.
um, and I think people would lose the incentive to try. They would lose incentive to strive for improvement, which is really I mean, that's part of our human nature is to better our circumstances. But
Yeah.
when you strive to better your circumstances and it doesn't work, it backfires, or you end up losing out because 'cause you're the producer instead of the um, when you're the producer and more expectations are placed on you with less and less reward, I think you'll
Yeah.
see those start to diminish and go away.
Yeah, and then people just started to check out of the businesses because it doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah,
And then people lose out on all the benefits of capitalism,
right.
like 2-day
Right.
shipping.
Like 2-day ship or overnight.
Yeah,
Uh, and there's some classic cases in Venezuela and Brazil have both had major setbacks recently, and there's some great PragerU videos on those countries as well, but we have plenty of, um, examples to look around to, areas that are implementing capitalism that are doing really well, and those areas that are putting limitations on it that suffer over the long run. Sometimes it takes a little while for that boat to turn around, but it does, and it runs
yeah,
right into an iceberg. So,
yeah. I don't think it's the government's role to be regulating the economy as much as it does.
well, it's funny to think about what makes anybody think that a single person or a single department could make all the myriad choices that a free market can make without any
Yeah,
intervention. The idea, like I said, of wages. If you want to increase wages, you lay off the regulation and let businesses thrive so that they're now competing for the employees and wages will go up. If I have a business and I need employees, I'm gonna be incentivized to pay what they're requiring to stay put, and once they're there, I'm gonna be incentivized to make it a positive work environment because I don't want
yeah.
them somewhere else.
Right, because it costs money to hire employees and to bring them in,
To train, all that
to
time
train
you
them.
lose.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, you're definitely better off to keep your employees happy and all of those things work as long as I'm free to make decisions and adjustments as a business owner. But as soon as
yeah.
I have someone else telling me how I have to do it, um and actually, that's another interesting you asked earlier about how regulations hurt businesses. I can't remember the threshold. I think it's, once you hit 50 employees, then certain regulations kick in. So as a
Oh
business,
yeah.
I might be motivated
Huh.
to stay at 49,
Yeah,
so I don't have to have additional inspections or whatever, right? So just
yeah,
really taking a look at regulations and seeing, are they having a positive effect? And a lot of times you don't have to implement them to see where they'll go. You could just think it through if we
yeah,
took the time, right? So,
yeah. All right, so my last question for you is if you could share one message that everyone would listen to, and it doesn't matter what, how they vote politically or anything like that, what would that be?
great question. I think I'm going to refer to Thomas Sowell again, who said, there are no solutions, only trade offs, which means no matter what the situation, no matter what the problem you're trying to solve, it's pretty impossible to solve it, like make it go away. Whatever actions you take are going to have trade-offs. So for example, um, if you require a higher minimum wage, then lower skilled people are going to lose jobs. You can't necessarily control the consequences. You can just control the actions that you take. So think through what those consequences are going to be of each policy or each economic choice that you make, because they will come. There's no way to avoid that. Trade-offs are an important thing to consider.
Yeah, I think that's something that everyone should keep in mind. I think that's a great lesson for everyone. Well, thank you for coming onto the podcast today.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, thank you.